Right, so imagine you're the Justice Secretary. You've just announced a massive controversial policy that'll strip thousands of British citizens of their right to a jury trial. Classic Tuesday, yeah? Now imagine your own courts minister publicly contradicting you on the key details of that policy in front of a room full of MPs. Not so classic. That's exactly what happened to David Lammy, and honestly, the whole thing is such a car crash that I genuinely don't know whether to laugh or book a one-way ticket to literally anywhere else. Welcome back to Brit Article, where we cover the absolute circus that is British politics, and today's episode features politicians who apparently can't even agree with themselves. Buckle up, because this is going to be brilliant. Oh, and before we dive into this glorious mess, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because if you don't, you'll miss the next time a cabinet minister forgets what their own policy actually does. Trust me, with this lot, it won't be long. So let's set the stage, shall we? Labour's got this genius plan to fix the court backlog crisis. And by genius, I mean absolutely bonkers. They want to axe jury trials for thousands of cases. That's right, one of the fundamental pillars of British justice since the Magna Carta, just casually being tossed in the bin like yesterday's meal deal wrapper. The idea is that by removing jury trials for certain offences, they'll speed things up and clear the backlog. Simple, right? Well, it would be if anyone in government could actually explain how it's supposed to work without contradicting each other every 5 minutes. David Lammy, our illustrious Justice Secretary, has been championing this policy with all the confidence of a man who definitely, absolutely, totally knows what he's talking about. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. And we know he doesn't because his own courts minister, Sarah Sackman, just threw him under the bus so hard that I'm pretty sure I heard tyres screeching from here. Here's where it gets properly entertaining. Conservative MP Sir Ashley Fox asked Miss Sackman a pretty straightforward question about whether these changes would apply retrospectively, to people who've already been charged with offences and are sitting there assuming they'll get a jury trial, because that's, how the system works. Now, David Lammy had previously ruled this out, very clearly, very confidently, very wrongly as it turns out, because when Miss Sackman was asked about it, she said, and I quote, "It's something we have to look at," which in government speak translates to, yeah, we're totally doing the thing we said we weren't doing. It's the political equivalent of your mate saying they're not going out tonight and then posting Instagram stories from the pub at 9:30. Sir Ashley Fox, bless him, wasn't having any of it. He pressed her. So when the Lord Chancellor said it won't be retrospective, that wasn't a wholly accurate answer. And Miss Sackman, realising she's just accidentally admitted that her boss either lied or has no idea what his own policy entails, tried to do some damage control. She claimed Lammy was answering in the context of remand hearings, which is politician speak for "please stop asking questions because I'm drowning here." But Sir Ashley wasn't done, because why would he be? This is gold. He pointed out that people who elect to go to Crown Court do so on the assumption they'll get a jury trial. That's literally the entire point. And now the government's saying, well, actually, maybe not. You might get diverted to our shiny new Swift Court instead, which sounds less like justice and more like a budget airline. And Miss Sackman, poor Miss Sackman, had to admit, that's right, that is the mechanism for pursuing what is needed. Translation, yes, we're absolutely going to do the thing we said we wouldn't do, and I've just been forced to admit it on record. You can practically hear David Lammy somewhere in Whitehall screaming into a cushion.
Obviously, the opposition had an absolute field day with this. Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick came out swinging, saying Lammy has shown himself to be clueless about his own proposals, and that he blatantly misled the public. Harsh? Maybe. Accurate? Well, when your own minister contradicts you in Parliament, it's kind of hard to argue otherwise. Jenrick went full throttle, calling the proposals doomed and predicting another inevitable U-turn from what he delightfully termed this shambolic Labour government. And honestly, when you look at the track record, can you blame him for thinking that? This government U-turns more than a driving instructor with a particularly nervous student. Now, this isn't happening in isolation. This is just the latest chapter in what's becoming an increasingly messy saga. Just days before this parliamentary meltdown, Miss Sackman had already admitted that jury trials would be scrapped even if there wasn't a Crown Court backlog crisis. Let that sink in. The justification for the policy is the backlog, but they do it anyway even without the backlog. It's like saying you're going on a diet because of your New Year's resolution, but you do it even if it wasn't January. Doesn't really add up, does it? She also claimed that criminals are gaming the system by pleading not guilty because they know it'll take years to get to court, which fair enough might be true for some cases. But then she went and suggested that shoplifting cases are delaying rape trials, which sparked absolute fury because that's a wildly oversimplified take on an incredibly complex issue. It's like blaming traffic jams on people who drive red cars. Technically, some of them are in the traffic, but maybe, just maybe, the problem is bigger than that. So what does this policy actually involve? Well, under Labour's plans, half of all jury trials will be axed. Let me say that again for the people in the back. Half. Cases involving sexual assault, burglary, drug dealing and robbery will be heard by a single judge instead of a jury of your peers. The Ministry of Justice will scrap the right of defendants to elect a jury trial for what's called either-way offences, which are crimes that can be tried in either a magistrate's court or Crown Court. Here's how it'll work. Judges will assess each case, and if it's likely to result in a prison sentence of 3 years or less, it'll be heard either by a magistrate or in the new Crown Court Bench Division. Notice how they're calling it the Crown Court Bench Division and not the place where we took away your jury. Branding matters, folks. The government keeps pointing to Canada as their inspiration, which is always a red flag when British politicians start looking abroad for ideas. In Canada, suspected criminals can only request a jury trial if they're facing 5 years or more in prison. David Lammy told The Guardian that it has been happening in Canada for decades. It is very normal, which is a fascinating argument. You know what else has been happening in Canada for decades? Measuring temperature in Celsius. Doesn't mean we're rushing to change our ways, does it? He also claimed that defendants often prefer being in front of a single judge rather than a jury, which might be true in some cases, but it's a bit rich to use that as justification while simultaneously removing their ability to choose. It's like saying people prefer tea to coffee, so you're banning coffee. Some might agree, but you've still taken away the option. Now, to be fair to the government, and yes, I'm actually going to do that for a second, the court backlog is genuinely horrific. Ministers warn it could hit 100,000 cases by 2028 if nothing changes. Over a quarter of all Crown Court cases are open for a year or more, with nearly half being violent and sexual offences. That's victims waiting, defendants in limbo, and justice delayed to the point where it might as well be justice denied. There's a growing number of victims giving up on seeking justice entirely because the delays are so lengthy. That's a real crisis that needs real solutions. The question is whether stripping away fundamental rights is the answer, or whether it's just a desperate government throwing darts at a board and hoping something sticks. And here's the kicker. Labour might already be backing down. Reports suggest justice chiefs are now considering adding magistrates to the new Swift courts. This was actually recommended by former High Court Judge Sir Brian Levinson, but Lammy initially ignored it in favour of his more drastic option. Now they're circling back to it, which suggests even they're realising this policy is about as popular as a fire alarm at 3 in the morning. If they do add magistrates, it'll be the definition of a climb down without admitting it's a climb down. We're not U-turning, we're just implementing a completely different version of the policy that happens to address all the criticisms. Classic political gymnastics. What really gets me about this whole situation isn't just that Lammy got contradicted by his own minister. It's the complete lack of coherent communication about a policy that affects fundamental rights. When the Justice Secretary doesn't know if his own policy is retrospective or not, that's not just embarrassing, it's genuinely concerning. These aren't minor technical details. These are questions about whether people who were promised a jury trial will actually get one. And the fact that this confusion exists at the ministerial level suggests the policy was either poorly thought through, poorly communicated, or both. Neither option fills you with confidence, does it? It's like watching someone try to assemble IKEA furniture without the instructions, while insisting they definitely know what they're doing. We can all see this is going to end with spare parts and regret.